9 KTRS, the National Guard is being called out. Michael Brown's family is holding a news conference in about 20 minutes. That's to talk about the autopsy that has been released through the New York Times, where 6 shots that hit the body in the arm and then the head. So that news conference will be at the bottom of the hour. We'll take that coming up at the bottom of the hour. Ryan Crocker joins us, president of the St. Louis County Police Association. Gabe Crocker, I apologize. Gabe, welcome to KTRS.
Thanks, McGraw.
What is the president of the St. Louis County Police Association? What is that?
Well, our association is basically a union, and we represent the officers of the St. Louis County Police Department. We're a chapter of Lodge 15 of the Fraternal Order of Police, which is located here in St. Louis County. So, it's a setup just like any other organization. We are the St. Louis County Police Association. I represent St. Louis County officers.
Okay. Well, we just heard Jay Kanzler, who is the lawyer for the family who owns the Florissant Market and liquor store,
right,
say that 100 or so plus officers were told not to engage the looters as they were looting his client's store. Talk for a moment. What's going on there?
Well, as you're aware, Governor Jay Nixon stepped in what I thought was, and to be quite frank with you, is a bit of a publicity stunt.
Mm-hmm.
He steps in and he says, we're going to have the Highway Patrol take over this situation. And so what you saw there were directives from the Highway Patrol. They wanted to attempt this hands-off method. And quite frankly, it hasn't worked.
And so literally they were told, these police officers, who are St. Louis County police officers, right?
Absolutely.
Because they're the same police officers throughout all of this. Mm-hmm. They're just being directed by Ron Johnson now.
Right. It was just a change of command.
Right.
The governor steps in with, for some strange reason, Sam Dotson, the chief of St. Louis City PD, and they step in and they say, you know what, the Highway Patrol is going to take over this situation. They're going to be in command. However, they're still utilizing our resources. So they were the ones giving the directives to officers at the scene. Of course, they were still working with our chief of police, John Belmar, and our command staff.
Right.
But what they did was kind of assume the tactical control of that situation, which is why you saw the marching with the protesters, so on and so forth. They wanted to do more of this hands-off because there was so much criticism over the methods that were being used the first few days.
And so while the protesters tried to save the store,
right,
and the police officers watched, I know enough about police officers to know they were probably crying watching this take place, and they are charged. They became police officers so they could help people,
right,
and they were under direct orders to not to do anything.
Not to help people. And that's one of the frustrations that has occurred since Captain Johnson from the Highway Patrol has assumed command of this situation. Listen, I'm not here to knock the troopers that are out there working hard or the city officers that are out there. In fact, when you're out there, these uniforms really are colorblind. We're all working together. And I don't say that to be cheesy or anything like that. I mean, it really is everybody working together. Mm-hmm. However, there are strong disagreements about the way that Captain Johnson has handled some of these situations, and one of those is this hands-off approach. As a police officer, you take an oath, and you really do, and a lot of officers really do take that seriously, McGraw. We say, you know what, we are going to protect life, we are going to protect property, and I was notified via calls and text messages the other night where they're saying, I'm watching looters, I'm watching criminals victimize these businesses, and we notified the command post, and the response was, don't engage them, let them do what they're doing. And I'm not sure what that is. I don't know if that's because they're trying to do this hands-off thing, which, as I've said before, has failed miserably, or is it just that they didn't want any bad press?
All right, let's go back.
Okay.
Sunday night, and just a point of order. We only have a short amount of time.
Sure.
I'm not going to ask or talk about the actual shooting that sparked all of this because you don't know anything.
Right.
If you did know anything, you wouldn't be allowed to say anything.
Correct.
And so that's not this. That's another story in this ongoing development of story.
Absolutely.
So I'm gonna focus on what's transpired in the police's job to protect everybody here. So let's go back to Sunday night. Sunday night, there was some criticism of the St. Louis County Police saying, hey, you didn't do enough. There wasn't enough out there to protect the Quick Trip and some of the others, Zisser Tires, and some of those. So St. Louis County, on its own, decided to sort of bring in more of a quote, and I don't want to use the term militarized, but all of a sudden you started seeing riot gear, and they were in these defensive positions. And I made the point, and I'm going to show my bias here, they brought out the riot gear because there was riots the night before.
Right. It's a pretty common response to a riot to wear riot gear. And I'm glad that you kind of avoided using that term militarized, because I don't know where that term came from, but it's certainly a hot-button item that's open for discussion later. I disagree with the way that a lot of people use that term. These officers, including myself, were out there last Sunday night. I was out there for 4 consecutive days, so before I was lucky enough to have a couple of days off. 15-hour days, it's hot. You're being yelled at, screamed at.
They weren't just being yelled at, they were being taunted.
I
mean, right to their face.
Sure, absolutely.
The dogs were being taunted.
Right, and I mean, you're talking about, I am so proud, and I really do mean this, so proud of the officers that were out there and the level of restraint that they showed. And that's what made it so much more disheartening the next day. When you would read the news, it was, the police were firing tear gas at innocent protesters. I was thinking to myself, well, I was standing there, and I watched most of the innocent protesters, or peaceful protesters as they've been called, heed the warnings of our tactical units that were on a loudspeaker saying, you need to leave this area. You need to disperse. And many of those folks did. And so I kind of question the integrity of some of the folks who are standing around going, well, I've got a red mark on me from where I was hit with a paintball,
right?
Or I got tear gassed. I'm thinking, well, geez, you had probably 30 minutes to leave the area. I think it's a very common response, and we received a lot of criticism, ironically enough, from, again, Chief Sam Dotson, Mayor Francis Slay, and unfortunately the governor and some local leaders. However, McGraw, they turned around and used the same tactics.
We're going to get to that. So Wednesday, after Wednesday night, where the tear gas came out, rubber bullets were being used, pepper balls were being used, the Washington Post reporter got arrested after being asked numerous times to move along, and then somehow he was the cause celeb. They then take over, the state takes over, and they're going to have this gentler approach. Now, here's my question.
Okay.
Sam Dotson, you mentioned him a couple of times.
Sure.
He comes out and says, I didn't like the tactics that were going on in the county. Therefore, I didn't allow my officers to be part of that process.
Right.
And he says, and I'm paraphrasing, but I think I have this right, he allowed a few of them for traffic control, but otherwise, I didn't allow my city officers to be a part of that Wednesday night or Tuesday night. Is that accurate?
Well, no. I like to say what it is. I think Sam Dotson's a liar. I think Sam Dotson is using this situation to gain cheap political points, because everybody knows in political circles he wants to run for mayor after Francis Slay steps down. And I don't want to push this subject too far off, but what he did, I think, was very unprofessional. I think it was discourteous, and I think it was, quite frankly, one of the worst backstabbings I've ever seen. It was really quite sad what he did to our chief, John Belmar, and to the people and the officers that were working out there.
You have one of your own criticizing you.
Right. Well, and what he did was he, from what I gather, McGraw, he basically shakes our chief's hand and says, hey, smiling to his face, hey, I really appreciate what you're doing out there, and, we've got your back. And then he turns around and says something completely different to the media. And, there's some rumors, and I don't want to go too far off course here. But
we're St. Louis City Police helping out the county police.
On Monday night in particular, the St. Louis City Police Department's tactical unit was using tear gas and their stun grenades or concussion grenades. And by the way, thanks a lot to them. I have friends that are on that tactical team or their SWAT team. They were in the mix with our officers down there in that zone, in the hot zone down there, and their tactics were crucial in protecting officers and getting that situation under control. The St. Louis City Police Department's SWAT team deserves a huge thanks, and we couldn't appreciate their help more in that situation. Excuse me. Then it turned political, and then you started to see, well, the city officers were still down there, But then all of a sudden we were told they were just working traffic posts. And, there's some gray area there on what day he was talking about and when his direct orders came down. But once again, they're back out there. You can see them. You could see them on the news last night. You could see them down there in riot gear, assisting our county officers and our troopers.
Okay, so comes Thursday, the peaceful night, as it's been called, all around the world. That's the one night where peace broke out.
Yeah, apparently.
Is it true Thursday night, Gabe Crocker, president of the St. Louis County Police Association, is it true that Thursday night police officers were told not to arrest people?
Well, I think in general, we were told, the officers were told, you need, try to use as much restraint as possible. Certainly, I believe there were still some arrests made in limited situations. But that first day is when, when the Highway Patrol took over. That's when our officers were kind of, were told, you need to back off, or they simply weren't deployed to that area. So we had individuals that were calling for assistance from inside the city of Ferguson who were told, you need to drive yourself to the hospital. We're not responding.
You mean residents?
Residents of the city of Ferguson. And once again, this is, we have all of these officers that are out there that are prepared to respond to this area. They're not spoiling for a fight, McGraw. They're there to help. They're there to respond to the citizens of Ferguson when they call for help. Remember, there's a lot of good folks in this town, and these officers have been told repeatedly over the last couple of days, well, we're not responding, or back away, or don't engage those individuals. That's very, very difficult to do.
So you're saying someone within Ferguson Thursday night said, I've been injured, I've been hurt.
It's happened a few times over the last few days.
And the police have told them, I'm sorry, you're going to have to get yourself to the hospital?
We've had people that have called for help, and basically we've said, we can't get down into that area, or we're not allowed to respond into that area. Now, there are limited cases where we have responded, but there are certainly other cases where we have not.
And the idea with the policing is, if we're much more friendly, then the violence will stop? I mean, explain this kumbaya strategy.
It's a very interesting approach, but it is an approach that I can appreciate. I mean, for all the political reasons that this thing was kind of taken over by the Highway Patrol, I don't blame Captain Johnson for the position that he's in right now, but I don't necessarily agree with the approach, because immediately we've seen that approach crumble. I liked the fact that Captain Johnson was trying to reach out to the community, trying to mend some fences, if you will. I mean, this thing is so hot right now. Everybody's so upset. But what I think should have happened is, if they wanted to bring him in, let's put him in action, engaging the community, and let's leave that tactical command where it was, and where it was operating just fine, which was under the command of our chief, John Belmer.
Gabe Crocker, our guest, president of the St. Louis County Police Association, joining us. Yesterday, Al Sharpton comes to town and holds a vigil at a church. Within that, Ron Johnson comes and speaks at this church, which was more or less of a rally for Michael Brown. And I'm not questioning whether or not they should have a rally for support for Michael Brown. My question was, and I'm asking this on behalf of many people who reached out to me to ask this question. That is, he's in charge with keeping the peace. He's supposed to be down the middle. He doesn't have an opinion one way or the other, and he shows up at a rally to support Michael Brown. One would think to the detriment of the police officer, just like if he were to show up at a rally for the police officer, he would be to the detriment of Michael Brown.
Right, absolutely, McGraw, and that's kind of what I just mentioned. I mean, he's working both fronts. I don't envy the situation he's in, and I can tell you that I don't want to say things here that make it sound like I'm disparaging the Highway Patrol, but I certainly can question, and our officers and the officers that I represent are questioning some of these tactics and these decisions that are being made. It's very disheartening when you're in charge of a force of 200, 300 officers in a day for them to get on their phones and watch him say some of the things he said at that rally. I don't mind that he was there, but that's kind of wearing two masks. And I'm not so sure that that's the most effective way to lead a police force of multiple police agencies. These officers are tired, they're worn out, they want this thing to end, and then they get on their phones and they see the person that's in charge of them saying some of the things he said, which I don't, he's free to say whatever he wants to say.
Right.
But I think that's a very, very difficult way. How do you lead that charge? How do you lead officers from multiple agencies effectively when you're on TV and captured in, screen captures and video footage doing things that otherwise would be counterproductive?
Gabe Crocker, our guest, president of the St. Louis County Police Association. You're the only one talking, so that's why I'm giving you more information.
Okay.
Because I've asked these questions of Captain Johnson, of Governor Nixon. No one's talking. So because no one else is talking, and you're talking, you're the only one who's giving us any answers.
I just want to get information out there, that's open and honest. I'm ready to to talk to folks about this.
From my count, from the moment it happened till Wednesday, no police injuries. No police. I know I have to go. No police officers were injured. Since they decided to take off the riot gear and take off the masks, my count, 6 officers have been injured. Is that correct?
Right. There has been an increase in officer injuries for sure over the last few days.
They're using Molotov cocktails, which, if lit and struck correctly, can burn an officer alive.
It can burn an officer, and it can also burn innocent protesters out in the crowd. It's a danger across the board for everyone.
So the bad guys are using real bullets, real bricks, real Molotov cocktails, and the militarized police force has used pepper balls, rubber bullets, and tear gas.
Everything with the exception of rubber bullets. That's kind of a misnomer. That's a whole other discussion.
Right.
I don't think those have been used by any of our SWAT teams or certainly by our police department. I think most people are mistaking sting grenades, which are concussion grenades that disperse rubber-type balls, or pepper balls as being rubber bullets.
Right, yeah. And all those things are meant to do is to disperse the crowd.
They're a less lethal option.
Here's what I want to do. This news conference we're waiting to hear from. This is the Michael Brown family. Will you stick around for a break?
Absolutely.
Gabe Crocker, our guest, president of the St. Louis County Police Association. We're waiting for that news conference. We'll go to it as soon as it happens. Our guest, president of the St. Louis County Police Association. We're waiting for this news conference. The Michael Brown family is going to be holding a news conference at the Greater St. Mark Missionary Baptist Church in St. Louis. I want to ask you, Gabe Crocker, Thursday night, the peaceful night. Is it true that the Black Panthers were directing traffic and more or less the only real law enforcement out there trying to keep the peace? Because they will tell you that they were.
No, I don't think that's completely true. I think in certain aspects they were probably involved. I wasn't there Thursday night, so I can't speak eloquently about whether or not what their role was.
Right.
But I know that there's been some folks that have tried to step in the absence of law enforcement.
Yeah. I've heard from numerous business owners and numerous people said that they're going to start policing their own places of business because the police were not. Have you heard of any vigilantism going on out there?
Well, vigilantism in the Charles Bronson term, death wish. No,
Right.
I haven't heard that. But, certainly we are seeing some business owners that are taking up arms and protecting themselves. And, they have every right to do that. But I think the response from the Highway Patrol or under their command has maybe led to a little more of that than what we really need out there. Because I want our police force protecting our folks and our businesses in the community, and they shouldn't be forced to protect it for themselves.
I think it also should be noted that the police, both black and white, because I've been out there, and there are many black police officers as well as white police officers out there who were told to take off the riot gear and were standing there basically as sitting ducks taking the bricks and the bullets and the Molotov cocktails, and there was protective gear in the closet.
Right, absolutely. We owe a huge thanks to our chief, John Belmer. Again, I'm not trying to I hate to keep plugging the guy, but he's just been a rock through this whole thing. And our officers were told, that from, again, the folks that have it under command right now, the Highway Patrol, Captain Johnson, that they didn't want them wearing riot gear. They didn't want them wearing helmets. So what they did was they sent our officers, troopers and other officers from other jurisdictions, they sent them in harm's way without protective gear. And when our chief found out about it, I heard he went through the roof and he said, that's not happening anymore. My officers are wearing riot gear. They're protecting themselves. And I can tell you, McGraw, I was contacted by by several of my members that were going, you're telling me I got to go out there without a riot helmet on? They're throwing stuff at us, Molotov cocktails, incendiary devices, rocks, bricks. And, we've already discussed that with our attorneys who are kind of looking at potential legal options against the Highway Patrol's command for putting our officers in harm's way. That was absolutely ridiculous. It's unacceptable, and our chief stepped up and said, no more of that. I will not have my officers out there doing that.
Okay, Gabe Crocker, our guest, president of the St. Louis County Police Association. The softer, gentler approach to this, can we all agree failed?
I think it failed in handling the complexities of the large crowds and the violent factions of these crowds. Again, I don't have any problem with helping to rebuild, community ties.
Right, but Thursday night they didn't use anything, and there were arrests and shooting and carjackings and things like that. Friday there was tear gas to protect officers who were going to be in harm's way.
Right.
So they used tear gas to break out of the mob crowd.
Right.
And then last night they came in with tanks and SWAT teams and all that type of stuff. So they were going peaceful, but then ultimately had to do the same tactics they criticized the county police for doing earlier in the week.
Well, the short answer to that is, do I think that the soft-handed tactics are a failure? Absolutely. Our officers have been out there. Again, they're not looking to get hurt. They're not looking to get set on fire. They're looking to get out there and do their job. And I have to always underscore the importance of delineating between peaceful protesters and folks that are out there that are upset, and they have every right to be, and they have every right to protest. I don't mind that, and I don't think any police officers do. It's the looters and the criminals that we're not addressing, and we're not addressing them with this soft-handed approach.
We're still waiting for this news conference, so you haven't missed anything. And I know you're yelling at me for a break, but I'm trying to get as much in with Gabe before we go to this news conference. Wednesday night, it was reported all over the world that the St. Louis County Police threw a tear gas bottle at Al Jazeera network cameras. What's the real story?
Here's the real story. I was actually there. I was on the front lines. I'm a first-hand witness, okay? It was actually the St. Charles County Sheriff's SWAT team that was in the area. They were at the intersection of West Florissant and Highmont. They had called my unit. I was driving my vehicle, and I had 3 other officers with me, and we were all in our riot gear and protective gear. As we were going down West Florissant towards the Quick Trip, our vehicle was just obliterated by rocks and bricks. It shattered the windshield out of my vehicle, damaged the hood of my vehicle. That safety glass, whenever it hits, it shatters into small pieces. We were covered, myself and my front passenger were covered in glass, so we pulled to the other side of the road. We could see the Al Jazeera camera folks when we got out of there, the camera people that were down there. We could also see a KSDK van that was unattended with the sliding door open. Mm-hmm. These guys that had thrown those rocks, these criminals that had thrown the rocks at us, okay, not peaceful protesters, McGraw, they fired tear gas down into that area to disperse them. We sent our St. Charles had their tactical vehicle pull down that street. They were kind of entrenched about 2 or 3 houses in. And yes, tear gas was fired in that direction. And we assisted them, taking their cameras down for them, helping Channel 5 get out of that street where these guys were running around. It's kind of a scary situation. You see them with the bandanas over their mouths, and it's hoodies, and it's very, very scary. And so we helped them take cameras down. And the next morning, having been there with my gas mask on, watching this, walking down the street, seeing them help them out, I read on the news that we were firing tear gas at reporters. That is so disheartening. I mean, it really is. It hurts your feelings
because they were firing the tear gas to protect you.
Yes.
In your car while you were being pummeled by rocks.
Absolutely. And they fired tear gas to disperse these people. By the way, how many reporters have we had assaulted?
Right.
Steve Gingrich from the Post-Dispatch was assaulted. There have been numerous other assaults on reporters.
Right.
I could hear the radio traffic. We had a helicopter flying overhead that said, hey, someone needs to check on this van. Someone called. I don't know if it was police. I don't know if it was civilians. Mm-hmm. Someone called and said, we're worried about these reporters here. They're right in the mix. And so that was actually an effort to get them out of there. And the next day they reported that we were firing tear gas at them. And I'll tell you,
thanks
McGraw,
for coming.
I'll tell you what, man, that really, really hurt the officers that were there. In fact, St. Charles County issued a press release on that, adamantly denying that they did that, and I applauded them for that effort.
Gabe, hold that thought. We're still have an eye on the news conference. It has not happened yet. As soon as it happens, Michael Brown's family is holding a news conference about the medical report that was released in the New York Times. It was posted online late last night, and it's been the topic of conversation this morning, as well as the fact that the National Guard has been called out. What does that mean, the National Guard? Are we going to see tanks and trucks? And, what are we going to see here?
Well, I think it's interesting. We were, again, criticized, the St. Louis County Police Department was, for handling this situation in a militarized fashion.
Right.
And here we are just a few days later after they've taken over. They're actually calling in the military.
Are the police officers still going to be in charge? Are they still going to be out there? Is this now only National Guardsmen?
I don't know what role they're going to play. Of course, if the folks that are in command really determine or they've deemed it important, the governor obviously sees this as a necessary step to regain control in Ferguson. Well, you know what? Have them come in. But I don't know what their role is going to be at this point.
That is Gabe Crocker. Gabe, hold on. Back in